Hello, people. It's part 2 of daily number 552, where we learn to be a better gamer. We're doing some, I don't want to use the word excruciating. At least I hope I don't want to use the word excruciating because it's fun for me. But the meticulous discussion of a lot of what could be overlooked as standard play. We don't want to fall into that trap. I think perhaps the most significant instance was right at the start of the game when we saw the Reapers. Most people would go, I'm following this build where I go 4 queens. And that's what I'm going to do, and it should hold this off. But a thinking player says, there are probably a few moments where I might want to go gas here. No, let me opt to continue with this plan to go 4 queens. You can abandon your build at any point in time. There's no reason you cannot. And sure, people will pressure you with these words like standard. Oh no, that is a good build. That is a solid build. That's a risky build. These are all words that have not actually said any underlying understanding of WTF is up. So I think it's very reasonable at this point to stop and just do a little overview of what we have seen in TLO's shoes. We've seen a lot of Reapers. We've seen an attempted expand that got delayed. It was cleaned up by Widow Mines, which we also saw. We saw early double gas here. We also saw a factory. We didn't see the reactor, but we did see the double Widow Mines being produced. So I think it is pretty dang safe to say that yet again, probably not going to run into any issues of mass Marines coming in and ruining our day. Highly unlikely. Why? Because it's physically impossible. In fact, our barcode player, I will note, went for barracks as fast as he could have, and he has no Marines at the 10-minute mark. That is the impact of getting this many Reapers early on, and the impact of deciding that Widow Mines are also good to put in there. And it's so easy to also discredit yourself, to just be like, oh, but I'm in Gold League, I don't know what the timings are. You don't need to use the timings, just use some basic reasoning, and you will not be absolutely spot on to the minute, but you'll still be damn close, right? If you see Reapers and Mines in a base and him going really early gas, probably does not have a whole bunch of Marines there. Done endo logic. So with a low ability to offend, I like this election from TLO to continue to focus on droning, to get sort of like the contingency spine crawler. This is like if 2 Hellions roll up. This is if a bunch of Widow Mines roll up and catch us off guard. I appreciate these moves by TLO to try to kill off all the things. I think that they're rad. I now want to talk about Swarm Hosties. I'm actually going to turn off the color changing thing, so that way TLO is just a nice solid hue of blue. I'm also going to remove them health bars. Swarm Hosts are so easy to get killed going for. They are just not lurkers. You can't just get 4 Swarm Hosts and be like, alright, no Marines are going to attack me now. You just can't do that, man. They're so freaking fragile, and they need time and proper care and proper defense. Here, I like that Swarm Hosts are happening. Why? There's no way he can attack us with a bunch of Marines on the ground. Therefore, there's plenty of time to go Swarm Hosts. Not going to ask ourselves, is this the best choice? I want to first just note that this is a possible choice. If the opponent was going for a more standard, quick 3 barracks play, we may very well just have killed ourselves going for this. We'd probably have to go Pathogen Gland and Fester to be able to withstand that sort of force. But why does this make sense? Our opponent has complete and total map control. We can't advance forward. However, we do have speed overlords. Why? Because we went for speed early. And if you don't know why, then watch part 1, because I explained it there. Continuing to drone up, but yeah, Nidus Network. We've seen this sort of thing before. This makes perfect sense to us. This was probably the most arousing moment of the entire game for me. He has scanned. He sees swarm hosts. He sees a wiggly pit. He sees the Nidus network. How many of you would shit yourselves in TLO's shoes? Figuratively. Not how many of you would lose control of your bowels and then psychotically say, I'll clean it up after the game. I know I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how many of you would freak out. You'd be like, you'd probably cancel the Nidus network, and you'd be like, I'll just have two. I'll just have two and the freaking swarm host. Double expand. I'm going Spire. Just GG out. So easy to do that. But what I find so arousing here is notice how first we did a clear series of steps to hit Overlord speed. We then did a clear series of steps to note why we eventually went for the swarm host, why that was okay. And in particular, we can also note that since he can't attack us, he can have acute defense, but not a muscular defense. He can have a bunker and some mines, acute defense, but he's not going to have a wall of marines, muscular defense. So, it makes sense that we could perform an attack with the swarm host. And of course, Nidus Network makes sense because we have Overlord speed and no map control otherwise, because he's going to have these Speed Reapers lurking about all over the place. This actually makes total sense. So even though it is scanned, we might not be able to do the cheesy, oh my god, let me plant it down here and try to get the win in a sort of cross fingers sort of fashion. But we still, as TLO, can very straightforwardly just Nidus Worm right here. I cannot emphasize enough how easy it is to just die going Swarm Host because he just built some Marines and killed us. But we know he couldn't build Marines at the start of the game. What really is our opponent going to do about this? In the unit counting station, he has 6 Marines and 2 Marauders. He can't deny this. He has some Widow Mines. Widow Mines aren't going to prevent a Nidus Worm from going up. This is fantastic. And this is subtle, but I think significant too. We have some extra queens that we use for early defense. What strategies would allow those queens to come into use? I'm just going to say that one more time. Forget this game for a moment. If we did go for 4 queens early, what strategies would be able to make use of 4 queens? Nidus Worms. Anything that involves a Nidus Worm. Anything that involves a lot of expansions. We actually see this second one a lot. Like hugely a lot. Players just going for 4 queens, spreading creep with 2, and then sending 1 to that hatch to inject, and then building the macro hatch and pulling back, and then all the 4 queens that were used defensively at the start of the game now each have the hatches that they're puking larvae onto. Cool, you see what I'm talking about? How there's the logical flow? Most people just sort of follow along with the build. But here, we've now done a deviation. We're not just doing this blunt, blind, get 4 hatches up and do the macro. We have these queens here that are going to be able to spread creep to these bases. Queens work well at the Nidus networks because the Nidus networks help provide a little bit of mobility. And what really can our opponents do? What really can Barcode do? He's going to consider advancing up like this. However, the Locusts are really durable, and TLO's being nicely cautious with them. A 3rd base going down, no big deal. Starting to unleash a little bit of the pain bring-in. Now, what's unfortunate about all this is that even though we've done some nice logical steps to arrive here, there's some floundering that's gone on, which is that in terms of the economy page, we have not a lot of minerals and a lot of gas. There needs not to be a plan to spend that gas, but there needs to have been a plan to spend that gas. That is a key difference. That's the difference between being in a game and going, oh well, shit, what do I do now? Versus, I know what the shit to do now. The gas is getting high. Maybe TLO in the future, in an upcoming game, will say, I will actually just get around 3 or 4 infestors to be able to defend myself back home. I will perhaps get these evolution chambers up earlier to be able to get upgrades going at home. perhaps I will just not get this extractor and have a little extra money and expand with it. Any of those is fine. We need to have had a plan. I think this is one of these moments where we ask ourselves, is 9 swarm hosts accomplishing the same things that 12 swarm hosts is? I think that maybe getting these extra 4 swarm hosts would not be as useful as, say, expanding, getting some infestors. We're still doing some nice contains. We're still doing a little bit of damage in the units lost tab. We're starting to see it rack up quite a bit for our red Terran. TLO needs to just have a slightly adjusted re-rally. But either way, that's fine. Now I'm going to step forward a little bit. I think that this is sort of a folly that can end up occurring when a strategy is being tried for one of the first times. Actually, has TLO been losing a lot of mine? No, it just looks like a little bit of mine harassment. That's a bit annoying, but not too much more. I mean, TLO's been slowly having workers chipped away at him for quite some time. I do think that these could advance some. Again, a really botched rally there. But here is sort of the moment where things become painfully true. Or, not painfully true, things become painfully clear. We had absolutely no defense, and we didn't even have any vision to cover the middle. So, we've talked a lot leading up to this point about the logical steps TLO did, about the, okay, A led to B, led to C, totally there. But what about a situation like this? How do we come out of this with beneficial knowledge? We don't just want to go, blah, it sucks. Obviously, this is going to be difficult to defend. So, first, I want to analyze this from the game is done point of view. We've just finished this game and we're asking, how do I fix this? We come back. I'm trying to go to 1330. Cool. Right when things were seeming really nice. And we can really easily say, oh, that's right. There's an attack that was going to come in 90 seconds that I lost to. Is there any tool that I can utilize to be able to hold this off? It's really easy to say, oh, Wall of Spines would have held that off. Or Speed Zerglings would have held that off. But we don't have that yet. Should we research it right now? What adjustments can we make that we can solve in about 2 minutes? I think the simplest one is that we already have Overlord speed. Overlords should be positioned in a sort of forward spot. We should have had these watchtowers covered. That would be the easiest. Then we can easily use these Nidus worms to retreat. I also think the transition to infestors makes a good bit of sense. Not just because infestors would obviously be a very nice tool against exactly this kind of composition, but also because at 1330 we had the damn money to be able to do it. Look at that. Look, we have a lot of gas. We're building swarm hosts. We have 4 more swarm hosts and 12 already out. I mean, we don't really need 16 swarm hosts early. Getting a transition rotating a little bit would be nice. So that is the after game kind of analysis. Let's just go ahead and do the sort of current within the game now that all these terrors are occurring to us. We've just had a lot of our Nidus network harass get shut down. We're sustaining a lot of damage. Things look grim. First, I think it's fair to say that we're pretty much going to have to use our swarm host to be able to stay alive there. We might do a further adjustment and just go, oh gosh, yeah, you know, if I had had those overlords and I had the swarm hosts up, then I could have actually pretty easily, or not the swarm hosts, if I had the infestors and the queens up, I could have pretty easily fungal growthed that and then use the queens to be able to pick everything off. I could have retreated with the Nidus worms. I actually should probably continue building queens. These are all acceptable sort of forms of adjustment. But now we're in this rather awkward spot where we have one base. We have some upgrades coming up. What to do? What to do? Alright, let's go ahead and stop at 1630 and begin asking ourselves some questions. Okay, time to ask some basic ones. Where should we expand to? We obviously don't want to be on one base. Where do we expand? Is 8 dudes in gas good? Nah, we don't want to ask that. LOLs! Where do we expand next? Is this the best place to expand to? Is it the safest? Is it the most lucrative? Is this the best place to expand to? Is somewhere else the best place to expand to? Just want you to consider this a little bit. Should we let these upgrades finish? If we canceled both, we'd have an extra 250. We could instantly expand. We could actually probably do a double expand. Should we be trying to attack? Here's a question I don't know the answer to. If this Nidus Worm dies, do we lose everything inside of it? I'm sure I've answered this before. I'm just going to look at the Units Lost tab. There's 3 Nidus Worms, or excuse me, 3 Nidus, damn it, 3 Swarm Hosts in the Nidus Worms. That should be like about 1,000 resources. So TLO, yeah, you lose everything in there. Oh, that stinks. That's a big butt ass right there. So I think there are a lot of interesting decisions to make at this point in time. What do we feel about the situation we've put our opponent in? He has a hyper-mobile army. He has Marines, Marauders, some Mines, which are the immobile portion, but by and large it is a very mobile army. In my eyes, if he had an immobile army, I would be really happy to contain him and then start expanding all along here. I think that would be really quite strong. We're going to take a moment, we're going to look at the way that TLO's very thin maneuver ends up panning out. Some containment here is okay as long as we use the vision. As long as we have the vision of these overlords to help us understand what position we're in. This is good right now. This positionally, we have seen that, in fact, if we draw a line like this, there's probably no Terran units south of this line. So, we now just need to worry about slicing up like this. This is a very nice formation. Burrowing here, a choke point with everything behind it. We can do a little bit of spreading out of the overlords. Doing a very aggressive contain. I think this is fine. I think this is nothing wrong with this sort of plan. We are essentially saying, I am going to try to contain my opponent to prevent a direct assault at the front. And in order to do that, I'm going to need all hands on deck up here. Still, do we rebuild the layer? Do we take another expand? What are the next steps that we want to be taking? I'm kind of the opinion that if we're going to be pulling this stuff off, the biggest concern I have is drops. Obviously, we are arguing that we are going to be safe at the front lines. Whether that's true or not, planting all our eggs in this basket is claiming, yes, I will be safe against all direct engagements. We're sort of seeing in practice. It's close, but basically, yeah, we are. Some nice transfuses. Cool. And so far, agree with this. However, I'm kind of the opinion that we really need to get some extra bases up. This, I think, is probably the right choice. Because drops is going to be our biggest concern. This has a much wider set of drop possibilities. Actually, I'm going to move down here. Look at the minimap for a moment. See this expansion here, the third and our normal second. If we had those two, this would be the possible set of angles that a drop could come in on. Whereas if we have just these two bases, we're a lot more secure to drops because we have vision of the creep tumors, we have this sort of vision. I like this quite a bit. I think I probably would not layer. I don't see a reason for the Nidus network to be that necessary unless, you know, obviously the drops were starting to come into our base. However, we have all this spotting going on, spotting on all sides. We have half spotting up at the top. Some of these overlords really need to make their way up there. I think that that's like a huge concern. But I think overall we're pretty good. I'm going to let this go on for just a little bit longer. I'm still very concerned about the drop aspect of things, and would probably say that there likely needs to be some transition either to infestors and just leave the infestors there. I think Zergling speed would be a fine upgrade to research right now, as we have a slight excess of minerals and not that much gas. I also think that another hatchery would be fine. I think that expanding here is a little risky. Here is actually probably the safest place to expand to. This is probably the next safest spot because it's safe from drops. We know our whole army is going to be here if we're going to be containing him. This does not seem or feel temporary. And we've seen absolutely no tanks, which is the last most important thing. We're really still seeing no tanks. We're seeing a hyper-mobile army, but not one that can really siege this by any means. There's also a mine somewhere around here. I don't know. Where's the mine? There it is. Here's our little widow mine. So we're starting to see the growing pains of having not considered the counterattack drop sort of setup. We're also starting to see that this, even though this pair of bases is probably the easiest to defend from drops, we still don't actually have any of the pieces up to defend it against drops. So suddenly these Widow Mines can just drop. TLO's just sort of charging in. There's some attempted breaking of this contain, but TLO is continuing to hold strong. I think the official bit of craziness ends up happening soon. When is that? Terran Buddy is running really low on resources. When does he do this? There it is. He cleans this out and just starts pushing there with medevacs. Just straight up doing the medevac shoving. And because we don't have vision, TLO ends up getting into a little bit of a bind. Even something as simple as this retreat path not being covered. It's not... This is not going to end the game, but this is something that is almost always going to happen. And almost always going to be impossible to stop. Look at this. The simplest, tiniest drop ever. Virtually unstoppable given this setup. Had we only had some infestors and some extra queens at the start of the game, probably could have had a little bit easier time dealing with this. So now I actually want to just go to part 3. Excusez-moi. Heading into part 3, as we see this increasingly odd game, we're going to do a little more analysis at the start of part 3, just to kind of make sure that we're not doing anything dumb with our setup of units. It's very easy to fall into that trap of, oh my god, we're drilling in front of his base with swarm hosts and it feels really good, but is it really good? We're going to be talking a little bit more about that in part 3, so stay tuned. Also, OMG dead t-shirts, so Imba must be nerfed. I love the Iron Squid shirts. Alright, I'll be back in a sec.